Hey guys, Karen Marchetti here. On this episode of Dual Process, Jodi and I will be working on a Melons quilt. We're both going to share a simple version and a more complex version. So let's get started. Okay, for my simple version, I like melon quilts because they travel really well as long as you can get away with using one color thread. So let me zoom in on this just a bit. Okay, I'm going to start right here. And I'm going to assume this is fairly small and that this is my first roll of the quilt. Excuse me. So I'm going to start right here and I'm going to come over and just do a quick zigzag fill in there. And then I'm going to come through and put a swirly. And then continue over here. And I mean, if you want to make these with a ruler, you can, but that kind of defeats the simple part. If you just go just back and forth, I find that super easy. I mean, if you want to do it like with a ribbon candy kind of thing, you can do that too. Whichever works better for you. So then I'll finish up here and I'll cut down my seam. Now you could, and I'm going to show you this first. So you could come back in here and then go this way. But you see how the squiggles turn upside down? That's personal preference. And normally I like to make things go opposite, but on this melon quilt, since all the melons are going like this, I want all the swirls to be going the same way. So what I would do, let me get rid of this. I would just tie off up here. Oh, turn my pen back on. I would just tie off up here and then retie over here so that everything is going the same direction. But again, that's personal preference. If you wanted to just continue back, you can. So I fill these in, do my swirl, fill in here, do my swirl, and it just goes straight across, continues right through. Whoop. And of course, if you were stitching this, it would be much neater than this drawing. And then fill this in right up here. So then you would roll the quilt down and continue it for these last two blocks. Okay, so now on this bottom section, I'm gonna, again, I'll start here. And we're gonna quilt over, just simple zigzag lines. Make your swirl and out. And on this one, I'll actually show you how to come back continuous on the second row in case you choose to do it that way. Again, and I kind of messed up there. I would try to squeeze in another row so that it looks more even. Sneak down my seam line, and now this one I'll come back. So it goes very fast, but again, your swirls are going a different direction. So it depends, personal preference, which one you prefer. And then finish it off. And let me zoom out. And there it is, your finished quilt top in the simple version.
Hi everyone, it's Jodi. For my simple design idea for the Melons quilt, We're going to do some really fun, easy, I feel it's really easy, flowing, freehand quilting. We're going to put one thing into all of the background areas, which would be the light. And then we're going to add one design, the same design, into each of the melons. So what we're going to do, we're going to assume that, you know, I don't know what the scale is. Ideally, you may be able to reach 2 rows of this quilt, but I'm going to assume that they're fairly large and that we're going to do one as a pass and just do it that way. So what we're going to do is start out and we're going to work our way across each row, but we're going to be able to do it totally continuous. So what we're going to do is start over here, and I'm just going to follow kind of along the seam line between these 2 rows. So I'm going to stitch over just a little bit. Then we're going to do 3. You could do as many as you want, depending on how dense you want your quilting, but I'm just going to do 3. So I'm going to kind of stitch the shape of the outside of the melon. I'm going to do like 1, 2, and then that third one I'm going to try to keep really nice and close to the melon shape, because that kind of will work to kind of stitch it in the ditch. I'm not worried about being right on that line. Close is going to be fine. When I get to this point, I'm going to go ahead and jump inside that melon and do that quilting. And what we're going to do, oops, moved my picture there, sorry, is we're going to stitch like a paisley. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. Then I'm just going to put some nice big feathers in here and then sneak out. And then we're going to do our 3 little spikies over here. And we can just follow that seam line down, travel over just a bump, and then we can pick up with the next one. Same thing. 3 little spikies. We're going to go into the center of the melon here, do a paisley, and then we're going to start with our feathers. And the nice thing about feathers is that you can stretch them out and make them fit kind of any shape. And then we'll pick up with our 1, 2, 3 little spikes down the seam line in just a little. 1, 2, 3. Oops. Then we can do the paisley and then go right into our feathers. So it's really nice. It kind of flows very nicely across the quilt. It's going to be able to be stitched fairly quick. Down the seam line in just a bit so we can get this next one, our paisley, and then into those feathers. Sneak out, and then we do need to get this last 3 little spikes. And now you could do this backwards. It's just the movement of it and everything, and the flow is much easier for me from left to right. And besides that, if this quilt is large scale, like we're assuming, I'm going to need to advance anyways. So I'll go ahead and advance my quilt and then pick up with the next row, and we're going to do just the exact same thing. So we're going to come in just a hair, do 1, 2, 3, the paisley, and then our feathers. Sneak out. 1, 2, 3, travel down the spine. 1, 2, 3. Again, I mean, we're trying to stay kind of close to that seam. Sneak out. 1, 2, 3, travel down. And I mean, I think once you do a few of them, you're going to get the flow of it. It's quite simple to do. Up to the feathers. Sneak down. 1, 2, 3. Travel. And then into this last one of this row. 1, 2, 3. paisley, and then our feathers out, and then finish off that row. Again, now for each of the following rows, we're just gonna, again, I'm gonna advance the quilt. I'm gonna start back over here on the left and do this same design. Now we're at the last one. Paisley, feathers, and finish off this last background area, and we're done. So I think it's really pretty because it's kind of flowy. Those kind of spiky things give movement moving up throughout the quilt. And you can always change the feathers. If you wanted to put maybe spines, little spines inside each of your feathers, you could change it up that way. Or maybe you want to change those spines to leaves. So you kind of have a lot of options with that. So I hope you enjoyed this design, and I will see you next to do my more difficult design.
Okay, for my more complex version, I like the look of little lollipops, I call them, and bigger and smaller circles. So that's what led my idea for this design. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to come in and draw 3 little lollipops. I like to extend the ends a little further to fill that space. Travel up the seam, ditch the edge of the melon, come in, little circle, bigger circle, little circle. Travel back down this side of the melon, put in next 3 lollipops, up this seam, put these 3 lollipops in. And it seems a little confusing now, but it becomes very repetitive. And the other thing I should mention, if you want to mark out the center of your melons and even where your circles are going to go, you can do that ahead of time. And if you need to use rulers for your circles, that's perfectly fine too. Okay, so from here, we're going to ditch this side of the melon, come up, add our circles, ditch down this side of the melon, add the next set of lollipops, up this seam, down the side of the melon, down this seam, okay, and then repeat on the last one. Down this seam, we're going to cut up out of the seam of the quilt to fill in up here, cut back through the edge of the quilt, and then ditch straight across that seam. Cut through the quilt, and now we're ready to do our second row. And I'm assuming that you'll be able to do this in one pass. So again, it's very repetitive. Okay, then we would need to roll our quilt so that we could do the second section. And there you have it. There's many variations you can do with this as well. So if you wanted to, when you're doing your circles, to just do squiggles, you can totally do that too. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. You can do this as a squiggly line. But there's so many different variations you can do to make it your own. So, have fun and play with it. You can just come in and do one big circle, squiggly line out. Just and again, it depends on the size of the melons, how much quilting you need to fill in there. So try it, try a couple different variations and just have fun with it.
Hi everyone, it's Jodi again. So this is my more difficult design for the Melons quilt. We're really gonna I really liked the design that I did on the simple one, and so I thought, how can I change this up? And really the only thing you're gonna notice looking at this that I have gone ahead and marked. So to me, this is a little more difficult because we do need to mark, because I need to know where the center of the melon is, but it's going to be the easiest to just mark corner to corner on the blocks, and I've gone ahead and done that so that you don't have to watch me do that. And we're going to use that because we're going to kind of do like a continuous curve inside the melons, and we're going to go from the center up to the point. Okay, so that's why we really do need to let me put my markings back in there. We do need to know where that's going to be. So for the rest, for the background, if you remember in the simpler version, we just did these back and forth lines. This time we're going to fill the backgrounds in with feathers. And the way we're going to do that, we're again going to assume that we can only do one row. If you can reach two, it will make it a little bit easier, but we're going to just do it as though we can only reach one. And we're going to use the seam line between the rows right here to kind of travel along. But this time we're going to put feathers in these areas. So what that means is that I need to do both the top and the bottom, and each row is going to require 2 passes. We're going to first stitch along the top and add the feathers in, and then we're going to come back over to the left side and start again and work our way across this center seam to do the feathers on the bottom left side of the background and jump up in and add our continuous curve. So let's get started, and we'll start with the first pass, which is going to go across the top. So what we're going to do here is we're going to travel along this top. It would be the top edge of the quilt. And as we travel, we're going to go in and we're going to do these really nice, long, thin feathers. So we're going to put like 3 probably will fit in there. We'll travel. We get over here. We're going to, again, same thing. Again, just like those spiky lines, we're going to try to keep that big, long first feather as close as we can because that will kind of achieve the look of stitch in the ditch without actually having to do it. Boy, these are harder to draw than they are to stitch. Now travel, drop down here and do these 3 long skinny feathers, and that completes the top pass. So now as we work across the bottom of this row, we're going to do the same thing, but the feathers are going to look different because we're going to use these long skinny feathers, but we're going to travel along here. So we're going to just keep coming back down to the seam. When I get to where I can't fit any more feathers, because you don't want them to get too tiny or look out of proportion, then I'm just going to go like this, like a half of a feather. When I get to the melon, you could very simply do a simple curved, like continuous curve. I'm going to do like a more elongated one, and when I get almost to the center, I'm going to curve it. So we'll get this nice little diamond shape in there. Okay, and then we'll pick up with these feathers again. So we're going to feather along that seam line, come down into the melon. And I really like this version of continuous curve. I think it just adds a little something extra. You get a nice smaller little shape in the center. And then we'll continue with these feathers along the seam into the middle. And feather. So now you would advance your quilt and then come back over to the left side and continue. We're going to do the same thing. We need to do the top pass first. So we're going to start at the top right here. We're going to come in and do these long feathers. Now, as you are doing this second pass of feathers on that same seam line, you're going to see what happens is that it's essentially, because you're drawing back in here, you're kind of getting that whole seam stitched in the ditch. You could also, if you chose to, you could drop in on the first pass and do the continuous curve. That's entirely up to you. But I'm just going to go ahead and continue on doing these feathers the whole way across. I really like how it looks because the feathers on the top and the feathers on the bottom are a different kind of shape. So we're going to come down to the bottom. We're going to feather along the seam. Come in and do our continuous curve using those marked lines and just continue traveling. You very easily, you just work your way across that seam line between the rows. Continue. You can possibly just aim without marking, but I feel like in my mind these seem like a kind of large shape, that melon, and so I would be afraid that I would not keep them very even. So I think a little bit of marking is not hard to do. Again, at this point we're going to advance the quilt again and do exactly the same thing. We're going to work across the top of the row left to right, and then we're going to come back to the left and do the same on the bottom. Okay, so that finishes the quilting, and I actually feel like this one almost is faster than the simpler version, but I think the look is very different. Those feathers are really neat and also very flowing. So I hope you enjoyed that design. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed today's designs, and be sure to join us for the next episode of Dual Process.